Where is my stopwatch? And I have no control over the timekeeping. I always switch my stopwatch on and forget to look at it. But well, should we also need some pause, silence after a long day? I don't know. But thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here because it's also a rare occasion to talk about, support in a public setting and to open up about lots of different, not only the possibilities, but the challenges. I mean, for me, it's a tricky conversation because I don't know how to spice up the conversation on support, especially coming from Bangladesh, where we have, lots of lack theories to start the conversation, but at the same time, there is a flip side. And my experience as a curator is mostly from the professional institutional experience. Okay. So I don't really want to be interrogated sometimes because it's kind of it's a dilemma, right? We talk about lack theory, but at the same time, there are lots of plans and models we offer. But what I was thinking today, let's not go into the institutional prophecy or promise of, just presenting lots of different offerings that we have. Rather, we just play around with the notion of support. Try to see me, I try to interrogate myself. And that's why for me the word co-curator is really important, co-curatorial in this process. But I think the whole day today was trying to touch different notions of support and starting from the performance this morning, honestly speaking, And it's so much relatable for us in many different levels. And I remember when I was invited for the talk, for the panel, I think the third or fourth sentence of my reply of the email was about this. I just said, oh, thanks for inviting me. It sounds like a wonderful program, but I have a Bangladeshi passport. So what do I do now? So you see, it always haunts you. But at the same time, there is a privilege sometimes, and we often talk about horizontality, but there is a privilege of representing institutions. Well, coming back to co-curatorial, for me, the question is also about looking into the support, not always from the verticality or one-way traffic of looking into offering, rather than seeing how much of reciprocity it has from many different ends. There are always multilateral collaborations all around. But how do we recognize that as an institution and how flexible we are sometimes? Also not to offer, but also to adapt with what's happening around there. Because, if I really want to historicize and say there is nothing much happening for the lack of, formal structures and infrastructure, it's not always true. It's not true, actually. So how do I to problematize a bit about our co-curatorial position? For me, that's why co-curatorial is my decision. It's very locational, I'm trying to respond to the situatedness of Bangladesh, or you can say the ground reality there. So I have chosen to be a co-curator, not to be like I don't call myself as a performance curator, but I'm more like a performance facilitator. I try to facilitate performance, but keeping that notion in my mind that, I cannot romanticize horizontality, but at the same time, I ask the question of the process and how can we open up this partnership and collaboration in much more dynamic way, where a curator is a facilitator, maybe, trying to look into the responsibility as an active listener, as a responsible, and trying to be pollinator, so playing around with all these words, just to also overcome the lexiconal term of research sometimes, and how you can embody, the decolonial with different models of offerings and negotiation of a common ground rather than, just imposing a solution so quickly, arriving to a solution so quickly. Well, I have lots of notes, so I'm gonna float around with words. That's where I try to play around a bit. But while coming back to support and, its vertical notion, I was also thinking, sometimes this question comes up about trust and lack of trust between institutions and lots of partnerships. And how come, it becomes sometimes so important just to acknowledge the autonomy of the practice and to see, what has happened and what has been happened before and how an institution can respect that from the distance, then only looking into a connection, So that's also the autonomy in the process of support for me is very interesting to see where you can be actually having a distance, a careful distance. So I just want to give you a texture of, some of the names, some of the visuals. So you get an idea of, other forms of performance practice which started way before. Then these formal institutions took place. And Bangladesh is pretty, I mean, I often say, Bangladesh is younger than my parents, which is a very important reality for us to remember, It's 52nd year of the country. But right after the 70s, we had our own challenge of autocratic regime, and this is Kalidas Karmakar, who in late 70s and early 80s, without any institutional support, was very active on performing. And that actually created a very interesting reciprocal inspiration for many others. It was picked up in 80s in many different ways, but not always well documented. But that brings us also into the question of archiving. Is it also desired by some of the practices when you talk about the need of it? But yeah, there are lots of things that we are trying to now dig in and to retrieve from the archives on informal networks. Dhaka University Fine Art Department, who don't have any formal pedagogy on performance art, and I don't think there is not a single space which has a regular course of pedagogy on performance in Bangladesh, to be very honest. So we always wait for this kind of biennales, which pops up every 2 years for just some small scale workshops, and always try to follow that conventional format. This is also very interesting for us to also think, how this whole notion of performance, the risk and the vulnerability we talked about, that can also be adapted to, bring a format which problematize the practice of pedagogy and education in a different way, so that the format itself has more offering to see how in other sides of the practice we can help each other. So these are some interesting links, where it was happening independently during 1985. You see the photo at the right. It's a very important photo because the building you see at the back, it's quite a known modernist building by Louis Kahn. But it's the Parliament building of Bangladesh. And you see 1985 means, there's this autocratic regime of the military, where this performance artist, Partha Protim, who's a diaspora artist, lives in Paris. He came and made this performance, and another very important photographer, Anwar Hossain, photographed the event. So this is quite an iconic image. But these are all some early hints of performance happening in Bangladesh. But well, the autocracy is gone, the military fell. But in 2014, you see Ritu Satta is standing there. It's a very different context. Another performance artist is standing there and saying no wall on Khan. This is also part of a democratic struggle when the state decided to have some walls on the parliament building area so that you can't take the photo like the left one anymore. And then all the artists, architects, they pollinated, they cross-pollinated to just protest and to stand there, to be really static, and to just, create a pressure, which didn't work though. I mean, the state was kind of very aware that the artists are not happy, but somehow the wall was built later on. But talking about vulnerability, I think there's many of the artists, whose politics lies around activism in performance art, also talks about the resilience of the body, looking into the archival history of photographs where, the street becomes a very important role for democratic movements, demonstrations. These are some of the photographs which are not always, dividing the activists versus the professional performance artists. You see, this is a very recent photograph of flash mob event or looking into the extrajudicial crime in Bangladesh, talking about democratic struggle, freedom of speech. Shahidul Alam, one of the curators, artist, photographer, was taken away got disappeared for 24 hours, so disappearance. And also the photo you see at the right side, it also talks about, how the mind and head is caged. And these are performance artists who always try to engage and activate themselves in the streets. And there's also very interesting connection with the Pan-Asian connection in Bangladesh, especially with Japan. But many of us know about the Shantiniketan, the legacy of Tagore, and how Japan was connected. And then we had Dhaka University Fine Art Department, but it's not state-supported Pan-Asianism. But you can see this list of artists who came in Asian Art Biennale. This Biennale was run by the state in the National Gallery. So the question of, finding National Gallery as a safe place for many of the performance artists is also very important for us to look into. But lots of Japanese artists started coming from the late 80s. And this man, particularly this man, Seiji Shimoda, is such a key person to look into other informal avenues of translocal exchanges between, not the, G2D2 country Pan-Asian framework, but trying to see how translocal can play a part. So in 1993, he founded Nippon International Performance Art Festival in Japan, which also got connected with Porapara Art Collective in Bangladesh, and surprisingly not in Dhaka, in Chittagong, which is known as a port city, second largest city in Bangladesh. But Chittagong somehow picked up this conversation with him and continued to see how they make a different kind of mapping and circuit of International Performance Festival, which also includes Jakarta and Chittagong and many other cities. And these are few names, Maur Rahman, Abu Nasser Robi, who were trying to see, how, this action poetry can also be a very important element of it in the early 90s. So this is the Porapara catalog you see. I don't have much time left, I guess. Yeah, 4 minutes, okay. So you see, this is another initiative in Chittagong, Cheragi Art, which is also more like a pop-up event in the streets, talks about the sense of urgency, how you bring in those performances which resonate the time. And this is the politics where it lies in, and it happens only for 7 days every year in the street. Well, I'll just quickly talk about two of the projects that I got involved with when I was working for Bengal Foundation for 6 years. It's a mid-scale formal art institution, private art institution, works on multidisciplinary practice. But once we try to have performance art week, we made a format that we try to connect two weekends. The first weekend invites 20 odd artists. It's an open call for the artists to come. Anyone can come and perform. And the second weekend also talks about sitting with the lens-based artist to think about how this can be materialized in exhibition space. And it's a conversation. It's an act of negotiation where it's not always a collaboration or someone says I'm not comfortable even for documenting me. But we just wanted to provoke this conversation about archive and representation by trying to engage these two communities of artists, like Imran Sohail, who actually rejected this idea of performing at Bengal Foundation. So that made us uncomfortable, vulnerable as an institution, when he said, well, I take this fun, this is very important for me, I go outside, do my own thing, you don't know when it's happening, but if you really want a photo, I'm going to provide it. So this is what he provided us. We still wonder, is it of some of the object he used for the performance or not? I don't know. But these are the layers of conversations we started having, with this kind of format which provokes this. Palash Bhattacharjee, another Chittagong-based artist who was very closely working with Parapara, he made a sonic piece while he was seeing, the Bengal Foundation has a new under construction building. So he was saying, well, I really want to work with the workers and, to perform in the construction space. So create a sound which embeds the memory of an artist's presence in your building when the building will be up. So he just decided, not to use our space as well. Another rejection in a different form, but he just made this sound piece there in Bengal. So some really offer different kind of exhibition making process in mind, how to represent it, and how some are gazing for the camera, some were not even comfortable, they wanted to record or unrecord, you can say, for some performance. One of the highlights was Atish Shah's performance there, who just made a durational stay there for whole time. And it also, talks about this. For us, the subtlety of his performance talks about disappearance in a very poetic way. And I can just quickly play the video for you to give an idea, just for a minute.
Atish Shah, an invisible man. This is the tale of an invisible man who is lost in a whirlpool in a deep river. A black form finds him in the whirlpool, and upon making him visible, flows through him back into the chaos. The invisible man is detached from everyday life, and his circle of acquaintances consists of underwater creatures. He plays with them, trying to avoid feelings of isolation and asphyxiation. The invisible man mostly loves dolphins, but also imagines rats, rabbits, and deer in his home underwater. His constant effort to reach the surface soon becomes obvious to his new family. He misses the chicken the most. Does the chicken represent his mother and child? Who knows? Everyone thought that he would get lost in the whirlpool, but he took a hold of the whirlpool and the black form instead. And then he looked at himself in the mirror and regurgitated it all out.
Yeah, I think, do I have a moment? Time to wrap up, right? Okay. Oh, I had something else to talk about too. Okay, but yeah, I mean, this process of, inventing this format helped us to co-think, also to think about some parallel expansion when someone said, I don't need you. But I mean, how you facilitate that sort of situation where you can talk about it. But I can just show you some of the photos quickly to wrap up. This is one of the exhibition I wanted to show, which is from this lens-based school I was talking about, Pathshala, where I studied at and also taught, still teach. I was the vice principal that time and invited a group of activists talking about garments workers' rights, and performance was a very important element of it, but we just shared a space without any institutional partnership. So space sharing, and also safe space sharing, is it also very important at this stage or not as a form of support? This is about Rana Plaza collapse, the building collapse, but you see the community of interest, not necessarily the public, faceless public. It has a face where the relatives of the garment workers try to engage in this process of healing by counting the number of the bricks which collapse in Rana Plaza and the counting the numbers, more like commemorating all the numbers so that each number is a life. And it also reflects into the institution's pedagogy of the lens-based school, Pathshala, and they are trying to see, how performance is an aspect to enact for the camera. So that dual conversation is still ongoing and to be continued. Thank you.